Hi, I'm Russell Sturgis, founder and principal of EAP Mentor. Welcome to the next in the series of blogs that I'm doing on creating sustainable change. This is part 4, in which we cover the 6 steps that are necessary for creating sustainable change. So far we did an introduction where we introduced what those 6 steps were. Then in the second blog we discussed the first step, which is about creating value or necessity around the change. The next step, which was the third blog, really looked at identifying the pros and the cons so that you could establish what was going to be better serving or less serving, and having a really clear understanding of that. And then in this blog, which is the 4th in the series, we're looking at the third step, which is how to integrate it into my life in terms of who I am and what's unique to what goes on within my reality, which is different to other people, of course. We then go on and have a look at, in the next step 4, which we'll be discussing in the next blog, we'll be looking at sustainability. How do I create change that is lasting and isn't short term? And then how do I develop a sense of gratitude and service around that, representing steps 5 and 6. So today we're looking at the whole idea of creating a strategy around it, or being able to integrate it into my life. And in the actual blog itself, I point out that there's 3 really primary things that are necessary for being able to integrate something into your life. First of all, that you're able to identify a sequence or series of bite-sized pieces that sequentially and sensibly follow on from each other, that makes it possible for you to get from where you're at now to where it is that you want to go. Now that comes off the back of the fact that previously you had done research into the pros and the cons, and so as you've been doing that research, you're working out what doesn't work, what does work, you're getting an idea of what steps would be necessary to make something work, and now you're looking at what are the things in my life that I need to do that have this become real, something that could really make a difference, and sustainably so. The second thing I talk about in the blog that sort of helps to create the integration is to be able to recognize or identify the emotion associated with the choices. One of the things that we know is that where there's pain or pleasure, or where there's joy or sadness, it sort of like magnifies the impact of developing neural pathways. And so what happens is that when there's an emotional connection to the strategies, it actually has a compounding effect in terms of having things stick much more quickly, whether it's good or bad. And so we want to use that to our advantage, of course. So part of what you're going to be doing is trying to identify, well, what's the emotional benefit for me? How am I going to be impacted emotionally? And particularly seeing how it can bring joy or pleasure in terms of being able to reinforce the actual strategy that you've identified. The third step is more of a don't. The other 2 are very clearly do steps. This one is don't do it. It's really a case of, as much as you've already imagined what it would look like and you've created the emotion around it, what we say is don't rush out and adopt a set of behaviours that you've got in your strategies in order to force or bring about the change. What we've found is that when you're able to stay mindful of it, we'll be talking more about that in the blog next week, what you do is you really create a nerve pathway, or what we call a neural pathway in the brain, that becomes really well established, so much so that it eventually has the potential to become the most effortless way of functioning. We call that the path of least resistance. But to do that, we actually say don't use personal willpower or discipline in order to force the change. Allow yourself to be the observer of what the steps are, and as I said, we'll talk about this later, as opposed to needing to go and fix it. And so we discourage you. And of course, what happens is and we've all been there when we've had this need for change, what invariably happens is we try to avoid it because we know that's going to hurt, it's going to take effort, and so we nearly become resentful, and there's a certain resistance, and what we know about resistance is what we resist persists. And so invariably when there's change required, our resistance and the fact that there's this avoidance energy associated with making the change forces us to give up on or eventually let go of, and sees us reverting back to old patterns of behaviour. So they're the three things that I write about in the blog. What I thought I'd like to do is just share with you an example of the way in which I was able to apply these things in making a change in one of my behaviours that had become habitual, as it always does, and needed some attention, and this was around wearing glasses. So I had a script for glasses and a prescription filled for glasses 5 to 6 years ago, and I had been wearing the same glasses over the last 5 or 6 years. In that time they've become sort of knocked about a little bit, the lenses have become scratched a bit, and it was sort of getting to the time where I thought, it's time for me to get some new glasses. Now I'd been thinking that for some time, but it's so much easier just to get the glasses out and put them on the ones that you've got. You don't have to worry about it, there's no hassle, they're there, they work, it seems like they're doing a good job, and I'll continue to do it. So ultimately I needed to create the approach that we've talked about up until this point today in terms of how related to glasses. So in order for things to change, the first thing that I had to do was establish a value around the glasses. And so in terms of having my eyes checked and maybe finding a new script. And so part of this was enhanced by the fact that I have a genetic disposition towards the possibility of diabetes in my family, and we know that there's a lot of eye health issues associated with diabetes, and so it was within my being serving to myself to make sure that my eyes were healthy from that regard. In more recent years, I've spent hours at a time working on the computer, and of course that became even more evident because on the Apple phones they give you a report of how long you've spent, and just over the last 12 months I had been writing a manuscript for a book, which meant I was spending hours in front of the computer. And I had heard about blue light, and I'd been having some problems with the sleeplessness, which was one of the symptoms that's associated to excessive blue light. I had a preference for using my iPad as opposed to using my Mac, and so I was being exposed to blue light quite a bit. And even though there wasn't anything conclusive there was a sense that maybe this may be contributing. And so I wanted to, it was going to be important for me. The value in having this all checked out was to find out whether I needed to do something about that. The fact that the glasses are 5 years old, maybe the script needed to change. Maybe my eyes had got worse. I didn't have a sense of that. I had a sense that actually my eyes had been better, but I wasn't sure about that. So, so there are a whole lot of things that were valuable. And because these were old and worn glasses and they'd been sort of knocked about a bit, there was also an aesthetic value in the sense that, well, it'd be nice to have something new to wear. And so I established a whole lot of reasons why this needed to be something that I prioritised. This needed to be something that came to the top of my priorities. And of course, what we know about values is what we value, we spend time and resources on. What we don't value, we don't spend any time or resource. And I hadn't valued my eyesight in that regard for quite a number of years. Now, because I'd thought about it, given it consideration, and had established it as something that I valued, I was now prepared to invest time and financial resources in particular in this regard. So now I had to go and do the pros and cons, which is the second step, and that was to do some research about it. So I started to do some research about blue light filters and read what I could on the internet about that, and there were lots of varying views on it, but I was gathering information. I was learning more about the disease states associated with diabetes and what was going on there, and in terms of eyesight. And I also wanted to do research on what the financial commitment was, because I wasn't particularly flush with funds, and I certainly didn't have disposable income just to go out and buy glasses, and my health insurance didn't cover eyes. And so it was a case of, okay, so I need to do some research in terms of understanding what sort of money I'm looking for, how long it would take me to accumulate that if I had a budget, how long before I'd be able to do it. So there was some research involved in understanding more about it and getting more information so that I was well versed. So I had the impetus, I now had the knowledge, and so step 3 is creating the new neural pathway or the strategy for being able to have this become real in terms of something that I fully incorporate into my life experience. And so the first thing that I worked out as a strategy that I needed to do was to see an optometrist. That way I could get a lot of the information that I needed in terms of how much I needed glasses, get more information about the blue filters, get more information about cost, continue to research and gather that information, which these two sort of go together hand in hand, set up a budget so that then I could clearly have a sense of how long out before I could actually acquire the glasses, when and where, in other words, which company I'd buy them from based on what was their after sales service like, what were the warranties, and how did they guarantee their work, etc., in terms of what was close to me. So there are a whole lot of things around that I needed to look at. And then being clear then about what discounts were available, for example. So I needed to be mindful, I needed to be constantly holding in my awareness the idea that I was wanting glasses so that I could find the best possible deals if opportunities came, and with my research I'd worked out there were a couple of companies, so I was looking out for those sorts of offers. So around the time that I had managed to accumulate sufficient funds, and I saw a deal that was going on in one of the companies that I thought would be worthwhile, then I was able to act on my strategy. I had the bite-sized pieces there, and the obvious first thing I was able to do was go and see an optometrist. It didn't cost anything. Medibank covered that, or Medicare, so I was able to go and get my eyes checked, found out what sort of money I'd be out for, found out more information about blue filters, was able to find out that my eyes in fact had improved, so that my script in terms of what I needed for the density, or not the density, but the strength of my glasses had changed and was better. Things had improved in that regard, and so I was actually wearing glasses that weren't really serving me, and so I was able to gather a whole lot of information that certainly set me up for being able to move forward with a clear sense of what it was going to cost, how long it was going to take me to get there before I could do it, and what it was that I looked like that I wanted. And of course what I then was able to do was go online and then begin to research what style of glasses. Now we went from developing that clear bite-sized pieces of strategy, now it's the emotional component of it, and the emotional component is once again removing any fear about my eye health, and in fact feeling good about the fact that there was improvement in my eyes. The second part of it in terms of the emotional component was being able to identify that, hey, I could actually choose a pair of glasses that improve my looks, or could look cool on me, as opposed to things that were a few years old that were looking pretty ordinary and mundane at the moment. And so there was a bit of a vanity component to this that sort of brought impetus as well to the process. So I was able to lock in some emotional benefits in terms of joy and pleasure. Joy at the fact that my eyes had improved, and pleasure at the idea that I could be wearing something that was nicer and more aesthetically appealing as a result of getting some new glasses. So that then left us with not acting. And of course the not acting was about being able to stay aware of the fact that these were all the things that I needed to do, and that the time to act for me, and the most loving time to act, was when I had the money put aside, not going into debt for it. So for me it was a loving choice. When it was clear about what sort of glasses that I wanted, and that I had the right amount of information to say whether or not I wanted the blue filter in the lenses and the styles that I wanted, so that when the time came and a discount turned up, I was already primed to act in a self-loving way. I wasn't acting from fear. I wasn't acting from trying to change old habits. Although this was about changing a habit of not acting, what I was really clear was that I had a whole lot of self-loving options available to me, and that was for me to then go ahead and buy the glasses that I wanted, to pay cash for them straight up front, even ask for a discount on the cash, which I don't know that I got because there was already a discount on them, and to get exactly what I wanted, and even get to purchase the blue filter glasses after having asked the optometrist what he thought was, and he says, well, the research is out on it. He said, but I've asked all of my children, or I've supplied them to all of my children, and that sort of spoke enough to me in terms of, okay, I'm going to go ahead with that, given the research that I had done. So once we get from there, then it's about sustainability, and then it goes on to elements of gratitude and how to be of service, and we'll talk about that, and I'll use this example around my glasses as we move forward in those next three blogs over the next few months. Anyway, I hope you find that helpful to have a bit of an idea as an example. I know it's a fairly mundane one, but it hopefully just gives you the essence of the sorts of things that you can adopt as part of your sustainable change strategy. Thank you for tuning in again. If you want to know more about EAP, go to our website, eapmentor.com. If you'd like to know or like to have some daily inspiration around mindfulness and awareness, go to our Facebook page and like it, which is at EAP Mentor, and we also have a monthly magazine that comes out which is all about mindfulness and awareness, and has lots of good videos, and it has these blogs in it as well as heaps and heaps of other really useful information. Anyway, thank you for your time, and I'll speak to you again next month. Bye.